the economy is doing well. Even if we were to overlook the mismatch between these claims and the very visceral suffering and pain people are going through in their daily life, it beggars belief that the same people saying this were only 6 years ago dismissing any linkage between the welfare of Ghanaians and economic indices. They said then that they had visited the markets and were not experiencing single-digit inflation prices in those markets as we would dictate. They insisted then that the best way to measure the strength or otherwise of the fundamentals of the economy was to look at the exchange rate, for its depreciation would expose the weakness therein. These days, however, even as the exchange rate depreciates to very worrying levels, they say, oh, the economic fundamentals are strong. Beyond these spirited linguistic acrobatics, the plain truth beyond these spirited linguistic acrobatics, the plain truth which we all see and feel is that the Ghanaian economy is in deep crisis. At the micro level, we feel the heavy impact of a troubled economy when we go to the market and find prices of basic items rising with alarming rapidity. We also feel it when we go to the fuel station and find that the already high price of fuel has increased once again. We further feel it when our rents are increased or when we get onto Trotro and find that fares have gone up because of increases in fuel prices. Importers feel the pinch because duty at the ports have become almost impossible to pay due to the amount of taxes slapped on them. The daily struggle of Ghanaians to make ends meet would be impossible to recount in one address. The question we ask, however, is how have things moved from bad to worse so quickly when we're promised a much better and more affordable standard of living? I would say this is the direct result of the mismanagement of the Ghanaian economy by its current managers. The present economic decline is even more shocking when viewed against the backdrop that this has been the most fortunate government in the history of Ghana in terms of the quantum of resources that it has received. After inheriting an economy that had made remarkable recovery from the shocks of a protracted energy crisis, commodity price falls, and much lower oil revenue, this government has brought this economy to its knees in ways that are totally unacceptable. In pursuit of a just and fair society, the NDC administrations of Professor John Evans Atta Mills and my good self between 2009 and 2017 achieved inclusive progress in the face of intractable national challenges. The resultant effect of our work was a resilient economy that was projected to grow at 8% in 2017. And indeed, the economy did grow at 8% in 2017 as projected. We're focused on the management of the economy in its entirety and not just in mere econometrics. This desired outcome sprang from sound and comprehensive policies which included fiscal prudence and the building up of financial reserves. Unfortunately, this government has succeeded in squandering all the unprecedented opportunities it had and has plunged us into dire financial straits. The situation has become so grave that only last week, almost every credible international financial institution, including the Fitch rating agency, reported that Ghana has lost access to the international bond market. Indeed, this government was forced to abandon the issuance of a critically needed $1 billion in green and social bonds due to very high and unsustainable public debt levels. This is a result of a total loss of confidence by the international market in the Ghanaian economy. They do not trust us to be able to meet our repayment obligations because our finances are in shambles. At the last reckoning, in the second quarter of this year, our total public debt stood at 334 billion Ghana cedis, representing a debt to GDP ratio of over 80%. And according to Fitch, this is set to rise in 2022 and reach 90% if no action is taken by 2023. This also means that the public debt has increased by 214 billion Ghana cedis from the 120 billion in January 2017. The debt to GDP ratio in January 2017 on the current rebased GDP was 56%. So how have we gone from 56% to almost 80% in 4.5 short years? Available data shows that Ghana's Eurobond debt of 13.2 billion is the third highest in sub-Saharan Africa. Expressed as a percentage of GDP, we have the highest in sub-Saharan Africa. That is, if you express the debt to GDP as a ratio of GDP, we have the highest in sub-Saharan Africa at a staggering 17.8% of our Eurobond debt. The consequence of this unbridled borrowing is that this year we'll spend over 35.8 billion Ghana cedis paying interest alone on our debt. Added to amortization, that is debt repayment of over 15.2 billion Ghana cedis. It means we'll pump 92.7% of tax revenue amounting to about 51 billion into debt servicing alone. With total revenue, both tax and non-tax, for this year projected to be 72 billion, we will only have 21 billion left to meet all other commitments after we have paid our debt service. And this 21 billion won't be enough to meet the public wage bill for 2021, which stands at 30.8 billion. The money left will be 21 billion, and our public wage bill is 30.8 billion. To bridge the gap between 21 billion and 30.8 billion, government must borrow more, and this will swell the public debt even further. International credit rating agencies have warned that if the situation does not improve, we could suffer further downgrades in our credit rating, and we could go as low as CCC for the first time in Ghana's history. Indications from government's own medium-term financial projections show that interest payments on our debt for the next year will reach over 40 billion, which will worsen an already very precarious situation. The debt overhang has been exacerbated by an unprecedented budget deficit of 15.6% and a primary deficit of 8%, including energy sector and financial sector payments recorded in 2020. The primary deficit is the clearest indicator of fiscal indiscipline. This extraordinarily large deficit needs to be financed through further borrowing. It was in a desperate effort to raise revenue to meet these obligations after squandering all the resources generated that government used at all taxes in the 2021 budget, which have inflicted severe pain and suffering on Ghanaians. In effect, they punish Ghanaians for their own mishandling of the economy. The pain and suffering that these taxes have brought, leading to the rampant increases in prices of goods and services, stem directly from the gaping hole in our finances occasioned by the reckless election-related expenditure of 2020. The government has attempted to conceal its appalling incompetence and recklessness in the management of the economy with the COVID-19 pandemic. While the pandemic posed a major challenge to the global economy, including ours, it is quite clear in our case that it was the desire to win elections at all costs that got the government to engage in unbudgeted consumption expenditure to create an artificial feel-good factor before election 2020. It is this overspending that led to the very large deficit that has undermined the economy and left us in this parlous shape. Data from our neighbors and other comparative countries in sub-Saharan Africa who were also ravaged by the same COVID-19 clearly shows that almost all of them kept their economies within manageable limits and have not been thrown into economic crisis that Ghana finds itself in today. Let me begin with Côte d'Ivoire, which was President Akufo-Addo's favorite comparator to Ghana in the run-up to 2016. He was always very happy to compare Côte d'Ivoire and Ghana. COVID-19 did not affect us any more extraordinarily than it did Côte d'Ivoire. Yet, their budget deficit for 2020 was 5.9%, and their debt to GDP ratio stands at 45.7%. Togo, Benin, Nigeria, Sierra Leone, Liberia, and Niger, and others have deficits below 7%, while their debt to GDP is nowhere near the 80% that Ghana has recorded. The undeniable effects of COVID-19 notwithstanding, it is evident from the above that the government placed the inordinate desire to win elections above prudent economic management. And that is why Ghanaians are going through so much suffering now. Long before COVID-19 struck, red flags had emerged, signaling mismanagement of the economy. We drew attention to this, but no corrective action was taken. Among these were the deliberate underreporting of the deficit through creative accounting, under which some of the expenditure items, especially in the energy and financial sectors, were treated as amortization items to artificially understate the deficit numbers. Another problem was the mortgaging of key statutory funds for borrowing, which was not reported as part of the national debt. Funds which we created, such as the GET Fund, the Road Fund, ESLA, among others, have all been collateralized for borrowing over several years. ESLA, for instance, has been extended to 2035. And so it will be a key part of our petroleum price build-up from now to 2035. It cannot be taken off. And when ESLA was introduced, it was introduced for a 5-year period to pay off legacy debts. All this was meant to lull us into a false sense of security that our debt was lower than it actually was. A serious fallout is that the intended purposes for setting up these funds has been derailed. Coupled with the capping and realignment policies of this government, the sectors they are supposed to be fund have been left completely hamstrung. For instance, let's take the District Assembly's Common Fund. The District Assembly's Common Fund is in arrears of about 4 quarters, making it impossible for any meaningful development projects to be done in the districts. Education, infrastructure, and road construction have also been in very short supply because these funds have been so heavily encumbered. Also, government's failure to settle arrears owed to contractors and suppliers, which have been grossly understated, has added to the crisis. The 2021 budget reported arrears of 8.2 billion, out of which provision was made for only 3.7 billion. We do know, however, that total arrears accumulated at the Ministry of Finance and other MDAs is about 30 billion. The rippling effects of this cash crunch has reverberated through many sectors of our national life. Take the education sector, for instance, where students of colleges of education have spent just 3 months in school out of the entire year because government has been unable to give the authorities money to run the schools. At the second cycle level, this cash crunch has led to an erratic academic calendar and uncertainty as students are sent home and recalled at irregular intervals. At the basic level, government has not been able to provide textbooks based on the new curriculum. For 2 straight years, no textbooks based on the new curriculum, forcing authorities to revert to the old curricula, which was supposed to be outdated. The present economic situation has fueled talk among credible financial institutions and analysts, both local and foreign, of an IMF program to restore investor confidence in the economy. Who would have thought that the arch opponents of IMF programs in the immediate past will now find themselves in a situation where an IMF program will be recommended as a way out of the terrible economic mess in which they have left this economy. I had stated when we went to the IMF in 2014 with economic indicators and an environment that were much better than we have today, that it was going to be our last such program because we were confident that our homegrown fiscal consolidation program, which won the confidence of investors, brought stability back to the economy and laid the foundations for the earlier gains, and that this administration would be sustained and mistakes of the past would be avoided. The reality today is that despite all the gains we made, which we will bequeath to the current administration, including revenue from 2 additional oil fields, and all the resources they have received, totaling in excess of 400 billion Ghana cedis in the last 5 years, our country is very bankrupt today. Many have wondered what has become of all the claims of supposed competence and know-how in economic management by those in charge of the economy now, after beating their chests and giving lectures only a few years ago. There are indications that government prefers to impose more hardship and suffering on Ghanaians by introducing very painful fiscal measures in the 2022 budget, which is expected to be read next week as a way of avoiding an IMF program. This government must realize that there is only so much that the already overburdened Ghanaian people can bear, and piling on more taxes and levies on them will have devastating consequences on our households. The very high cost of living will go through the roof, leading to severe suffering for millions of people. And in any case, what happened to the mantra of from taxation to production? This is not a time for more taxes. The people are already reeling under the heavy weight of existing taxes. This is a time for efficiency and the modest use of the taxes that are collected from Ghanaians. The ostentation and opulence that have characterized the spending of taxpayers' money contrast sharply with the suffering of the people. The misuse of scarce resources on the avoidable creature comforts of the president and other leading officials must come to an end. It is an unpardonable show of disrespect and insensitivity to the plight of the suffering of the mass of Ghanaian cities spent on renting luxurious aircrafts for presidential travel at a time at a time when the state of Ghana has a fully fitted and airworthy executive jet that can ferry the president anywhere in this world. And I know because I use that aircraft. Professor Mills used that aircraft. The staggering 68 million Ghana cedis that was spent on presidential travel for the first 9 months of 2019 alone constituted an unconscionable waste of very limited public resources at a time that the population was being asked to tighten their belts. If you ask people to tighten the belt, you must be the first to show the way by tightening your own belt. This must be in tune with the sensibilities of the people. For the public good and not for the excessive comfort of the leaders. Of ways to address some of the more pressing concerns of the people. The loss of confidence in the economy has triggered very worrying sell-off of our bonds. And the sell of our bonds is not due to Sam Jatta George. Don't blame Sam Jatta George for the loss of confidence in our bonds. And this is putting further pressure on our beleaguered city. Firm decisions need to be taken immediately to demonstrate to investors that we have what it takes to turn the situation around. The critical decisions that must be taken to save the economy from imminent catastrophe must be guided solely by what is prudent and in the national interest, and not what is politically expedient. Another problem that requires immediate resolution is the explosion in unemployment. The specter of tens of thousands of frustrated and desperate young men and women running and falling over themselves to apply for very limited positions in security agencies, as we have recently seen, is most heartbreaking and deeply disturbing. Unemployment has truly become a national security crisis. Somebody says it's a pandemic. I agree with you. Here too, the government's approach has been one of nonchalance and the bandying about of dubious employment creation figures. This has been coupled with ad hoc and unsustainable measures that have led to throwing back onto the streets of tens of thousands of NAPCO recruits with virtually no hope of finding sustainable employment. At the core of our message to the people of Ghana in 2020 was jobs, because the unemployment issue was staggering and the youth bulge has surely become a major threat to our economy and our country. And that is why we made jobs the central pillar of our manifesto for the 2020 elections. From all the pillars of our policy planks in the People's Manifesto, infrastructure for growth, fixing the economy, tax cuts for jobs, developing a digital, functional economy, among others, our focus was on jobs and prosperity for all. Indeed, that was the slogan. But for the actions of the Electoral Commission and the subsequent verdict of the Supreme Court, an NDC administration would probably have been in place today, and the implementation of our various people-centered policies would have provided you and all of us better conditions of living than we are seeing today. Unemployment continues to plague our country, and it is clear this government has no sustainable plan to address it. The botched NAPCO experiment has proven not to be the pathway and the means to an end. We need to come together and face youth unemployment head-on. And I have said previously that we are prepared to cooperate with government to go into a jobs and youth employment summit so that we can all bring our ideas to bear in easing the problem that our youth face. The NDC's 1 million Ejumapa jobs creation plan, the free technical vocational education and training, and national apprenticeship programs as contained in our manifesto are still relevant and available for this government to draw on for implementation. We will not take any copyright fees. If well implemented, we can create an average of 250,000 jobs every year for the young people of Ghana. In our manifesto, we also provided plans to make Ghana a 24-hour economy with 3 shifts of 8 hours each. Our plan was to aggressively diversify our economy, provide more public sector jobs, enhance productivity, and add value to our products for export. This would answer Goal 8 of the Sustainable Development Goals, that is decent work and economic growth. When I recently addressed the African Economic Congress, I urged Africa to engage and incentivize technology companies to focus on neglected areas and sectors that will impact the lives of our people, such as agribusiness, and further encourage fintech companies to show more differentiation and diversification instead of the seeming over-concentration on creating only payment platforms that are high-yielding today. I believe, for example, that telemarketing and online internet shopping will continue to offer opportunities for our youth in the distribution value chain. These are not things that I talk about in a vacuum. They are well thought through and structured solutions ready for implementation. On pages 41 and 42 of the abridged version of the 2020 People's Manifesto, we have laid out comprehensively how a digitally functional economy will be developed, among others, build on the infrastructure needed, train and create jobs, ensure expanded financial inclusion, introduce next generation agriculture, cybersecurity, among others. To further reduce the burden of unemployment, this government has a unique opportunity in the 2022 budget statement to lessen the tax burden on small and medium-scale businesses. They must be allowed to grow, to become more innovative and expand their employment generation capacity. While I'm aware of the tempting desire for government to amass massive revenues for their untempered consumption-driven appetite, I need to caution that we must not kill the hen that lays the golden egg. In this process,